All right, so this is going to be the last video I want to make today, and I may not be able to make another video for a while, so I apologize for that, but I will try and do my best. Okay, so people often ask me, how do you do stuff if you're not this 14th Amendment citizen and have all the Social Security number and all this stuff to be able to get all these privileges? And that's a very difficult question, and it's personal, but I can break down 3 different ways for you. Okay, rather than go into little intimate details, I can break down the 3 ways. So let's first off, let's look at a detailed case here called Chaswolf Packing Company versus Court of Industrial Relations of the State, 262 U.S. 522 in 1923. Now, as we read through this, I want you to pay attention to how many times the justice who wrote this opinion for the SCOTUS uses the word public. Because when we're dealing with commerce, that is public business. Whether you think your business is privately owned or we call it a private corporation, it's technically really not. Everything is public. And here's why. This case explains it to us. Okay, so let's get started here with first. This is talking about now Chaswolf Packing Company, so it's kind of like dealing with meat packing. First, the act declares that the preparation of human food is affected by a public interest. And the power of the legislature so to declare and then to regulate that business, the business, is established. And I should have a period there that got copied in off the whole thing. I'm just kind of taking the key points here. Second, the power to regulate a business affected with a public interest extends to fixing wages. Wages, salaries, and tips are income in the stream of commerce. And terms of employment. Employment is a term of commerce, public business, to secure continuity of operation. Third, businesses said to be clothed with a public interest, justifying some public regulation, may be divided into 3 classes. Now, 99% of the businesses are going to fall into 3, but let's take a look at the first 2. Those which are carried on under the authority of a public grant of privileges, which either expressly or impliedly imposes the affirmative duty of rendering a public service demanded by any member of the public, such as are the railroads, other common carriers, and public utilities. Okay? So if you're under a public grant, could be a public hospital, remember this is back in 1923, and back when public, a lot of things weren't public, especially in healthcare. They were generally, you probably see a lot of hospitals that still carry names of church organizations, right? Or they were run by some sort of convent or monkish order or something, You'll see that, Our Lady of the Sacred Heart Hospital and Clinic. Okay, well, at one time it was probably run by that convent, but now it's probably corporate, okay, because most of those sold out. Okay, number 2, certain occupations. Oh, that's a commercial term. If you're occupied in employment and commerce, regarded as exceptional. Ooh, yeah, that's kind of like that unusual and extraordinary. So the public interest attaching to which recognized from earliest times, a long time ago, has survived the period of arbitrary laws by Parliament or colonial legislatures for regulating all trades and callings. So if you have an occupational license or a professional license in order to do the job, the occupation, the employment that you're doing, you fall into number 2. It could be a beauty salon. You have a license to cut hair. Anywhere you have to have some sort of professional or occupational license, you're falling into number 2 because those occupations are exceptional. They're not the usual and ordinary. They're trades and callings. such as those are the keepers of inns, what we call a public house. Hotels are public houses, motels, public houses. You can't come to my house and get a room in my house, but you can go to Howard Johnson's house and get a room in his house because he's a public house, so he's fully regulated and controlled. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't invite you privately into my house and let you sleep in my house for the night. But I'm not engaging in commerce. I'm not telling you, setting a price for what you have to give me to have a room in my house. I'm freely opening my door and allowing you to stay. Now, if you choose to give me a free will offering in thanks and say, thank you very much for sheltering me and clothing me, but it's your free will choice to do that. I'm not demanding anything to you. That's a private house. That's not regulated and controlled. So cabs and grist mills, where you take your grain to be ground up, But they're just giving you some examples there. So number 3, here's where most of us fall into, businesses which, though not public at their inception, I want to start a business, may be fairly said to have risen to be such and have become subject in consequence, free will choices, to some government regulation. They have come to hold such a peculiar, again, kind of like that unusual and extraordinary, relation to the public that this is superimposed upon them. The choices that you're making to operate in commerce instead of private business when you want to start a business, you're open to the public. You advertise and publish in public your hours of operation, your phone number, your address. You're affecting the public, and now this regulation is superimposed upon you. In the language of the cases, the owner, by devoting his business to the public use, in effect, grants the public an interest in that use and subjects himself to public regulation to the extent of that interest. Although the property continues to belong to its private owner, legal title, and to be entitled to protection accordingly. So just because you fall into this doesn't mean that you give up your legal title to use and possess that business property. But remember, you still don't own it outright. The state has an interest in you under parens patriae and in your business because you've never paid any debts, and this is all of that going back to ownership. So you still retain the legal title to the property to use and possess it over any other individual's interests other than the state and the central bank. So here's some editorial comments. If you have a state-issued birth certificate, a social security number, you're a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, a U.S. national, U.S. person, and or your business has an EIN or TIN, employer identification number, taxpayer identification number, also the SSN serves the same, and you're set up to do commerce, public business as a sole proprietor, licensed, registered, and with the state and the federal government if you're going to be doing interstate stuff. You've established an LLC or an LLP or an S corp or C corp or any other kind of commercial business entity, and is registered with the state, is a registered tax collector, i.e. you get a sales tax certificate, that sort of thing. You're collecting Social Security, FICA, FUTA, etc. for you're hiring employees to be occupied for income, and they're hoping to earn a share of your corporate profit and gain from the stream of commerce. And you file tax returns, and your business is open to the public, affecting a public interest. Whoops. Fell asleep. Come on. It's the government's business and the Fed's business, and you have mere legal title to possession and use of the business and will be regulated and controlled in the stream of commerce. Okay, so this is what we call, Canaanite trafficking in the Bible. This is illegal in the Bible. You're not to do it. Okay? But it's what most people do because that's all they know. So here's that first way. Here's the 3 ways to do stuff, you know. So worldly commerce, public business, whether it's privately held, you know, you think you're private or not, you're affecting the public. You're doing public business. Everything is public. You're open to the public. You're advertising in the public. You've got signage. You've got yellow page ads, whatever. Okay, public, public, public. You're in commerce. You're probably a member of the Chamber of Commerce. You're accepting commercial paper as payment, as the reciprocity or consideration in these commercial transactions. So you're accepting Federal Reserve note, dollar bills, notes, checks, bank checks, credit cards, you know, all under the Federal Reserve system. You're probably business licensed, occupational licensed, professional licensed. You're insured under a maritime insurance contract. You're advertising. So, you know, pretty much everything from the Chaz Wolf case. Now, if you're striving to get out of that, you must be righteous and render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. This is all Caesar's, okay? Now, let me, before we finish here, I'll pull that back up. Let me show you a couple of other, we'll go back. I think I've used these before, but we'll show you a few. Doyle versus Mitchell Brothers. The act employs the term income in its natural and obvious sense as importing something distinct from principal or capital. Income is not property, kids. Income is derived from property. And conveying the idea of gain. Income is corporate gain or increase arising from corporate activities. So all of the profit, corporate profit you make, whether you're a corporation or not, sole proprietor, it doesn't matter. When you're engaged in commerce, after you've deducted all of your expenses of doing business, whatever's left over is your income. And that is corporate profit and gain from commerce, denominated in Federal Reserve note dollar units, for which you have to pay a tribute. Why? Why do you got to pay a tribute on that? Income is necessarily the product of the joint efforts of the state and the recipient of the income, whether that's the employer or the employee. The state furnishing the protection. It's the state's economy, the state's stream of commerce, whether that's interstate or intrastate. Providing the protection, the economy necessary to enable the recipient to produce, receive, and enjoy it, the income. And a tax thereon is the last analysis, simply a portion cut from the income and appropriated by the state as its share thereof. Okay? You got to pay your mafioso boss the protection racket money. One last one here. Excises. Remember, the Constitution of the United States says you can have direct taxation on somebody's head or excise taxes, which is a privilege tax for doing some sort of activity. Now, we don't use direct taxes in the United States. No, the income tax is not a direct tax. It's an excise tax on the privileges being employed in the stream of commerce. So excises in their original sense or something cut off the price paid on a sale of goods in the stream of commerce as a contribution to support of government, to the support of government. The word has, however, come to have a broader meaning and includes every form of taxation which is not a burden laid directly upon persons or property. You know, in the United States, property has never been taxed. People laugh and say, that's not true, I pay a property tax. No, you don't. You pay an ad valorem tax on the value of your property denominated in Federal Reserve notes because you don't really own it. It's a fealty tax, a feudal tax on that property because you only have legal title. Go back and watch those videos. In other words, excise includes every form of charge imposed on by public authority for the purpose of raising revenue upon the performance of an act. Remember, you want to do something that isn't natural law allowed, you're going to have this fee imposed for the sin of violating the law of God. You wicked, wicked individual. The enjoyment of a privilege, not a right, right? Privileges are extraordinary. They're not natural rights. Or the engaging in an occupation. Oh, see, that's what excises are for choosing to do something. Occupation is something done in the stream of commerce. Corporate capacity as a numbered, registered with your SSN, EIN, TIN, federal employee or taxpayer, employer ID number. And you're discharged with Federal Reserve credit in the hopes of obtaining corporate profit or gain, income. What you basically did was, it's called an equitable conversion in law. You have a natural right to your labor. But for that, you got to conduct private business, which we're going to get into. You don't want to do that because that is really freaking difficult, especially as time has moved on and 99.99999% of all commercial activity, all economic activity, trade, everything is in commerce. So it's much easier for you to now just go, I'm going to equitably convert myself and trade my natural right to my labor, give that to an employer in the stream of commerce where I'm going to be employed in an occupation with my taxpayer identification number so I can hopefully earn a share of the corporate profit and gain of my employer, for which I've got to pay a tribute, an excise, to the master who provided the stream of commerce and enabled me to enjoy the income. So sit down, shut up, all you tax protesters out there, and render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. There is no common law or natural law right to be employed in the stream of commerce in corporate capacity. That is not a right. That is a licensed, regulated, and controlled privilege for which a tribute is owed to Caesar. So sit down, shut up, ride the back of the bus, and file and pay the taxes that you owe. Okay? So we got worldly commerce. So how does somebody like me do this? Well, I can't. I can't do this. But what I can do is I can provide ministerial services, not employment. This is voluntary now, to somebody who has this. So, a U.S. person creates a straw man to do their business so they're not personally liable, like an LLC or something. They create some sort of commercial business entity, an artificial person, so that they're not liable. Okay, but now, how do they get help? Well, they can either go into the commercial stream and hire, i.e. rent, one of the federal government's employees, i.e. taxpayer identification number. That's what you are, kids. You're a U.S. person with a taxpayer or employee identification number through the federal government, your master. And your employer, also another U.S. person, is renting you for a fee from the federal government to be employed in an occupation in their commercial business. Okay? So your renter has to pay your master, the renter, who's your employer, who's renting your labor from Uncle Sam, has to pay Uncle Sam a fee for renting you. What's that? FICA, FUTA, SSN taxes. Your owner, well, not your owner, your employer, master, also has to pay income taxes because that's what he's hoping to make. He's hoping to make commercial profit and gain through commerce, Canaanite trafficking, public business. And you, as the employee, also has to pay that income. Now, what if somebody like me, who's got some skill sets, and the guy says, hey, I really need some help. I want to pray to you to come and help me. Now, that's not employment. We're not setting up a long-term arrangement. This is just a temporary thing. And he is asking for my help. I can say yes or no. Now, if I agree, I can't dictate terms. I can't say, well, you got to pay me this much. No. This is ministry. He has to give unto the Levite, servant, minister, according to his service. It's called a free will offering. Okay? But I don't surrender the ownership of my labor. I keep the ownership of my labor, and I'm just helping this someone. And whether or not I get something in return for that, that's my choice. But I can't dictate any terms to him. No contract. It's free assembly. It's not employment. Cannot dictate terms. Okay, I'm just helping someone out, freely choosing to give my labor, charity, service to feed his sheep. And in the process, I'm going to minister to him, explain to him how the world works and how if he wants to make changes while I'm helping him, whatever it is I'm doing. So there's nothing public about this. It's all private and no commerce. Okay? So while we're talking about this, here's the third way. It's through ministry. Now, this requires a lot of faith, fidelity, and allegiance to Yahuwah, because you're basically, again, serving Yahuwah by fulfilling the primary doctrine here to feed his sheep. Take care of widows and orphans. Take care of those without families. Help families in their time of need. So again, this is by free will service, which is charity, which is love. And if they want to give me anything, it's by free will offering. I cannot dictate terms. I can't say, well, I think for that amount of time, my time is worth $80. No. That's going to be commerce. That's employment. Because what are they going to give me? They're going to give me $80. They're going to give me Federal Reserve note dollar units or write out a check. I can't accept that crap. What am I going to do with a check? What am I going to do with a credit card? I don't have a bank account. Now, I can take, under this free will offering thing, I can take these Federal Reserve notes. But usually I want them to give me substance. I don't even want the Federal Reserve notes. I can because they're, because I can just turn around and go, use them somewhere else. But because I'm not dictating the terms, it's not employment, it's ministry. And I'm completely separate from the world anyway. I have no taxpayer identification number. I gotta find that. Let's get through this and maybe we can find that. There's a court case where it said, the tax laws are there for taxpayers, not for non-taxpayers. If you're not a taxpayer, those laws don't apply to you, right? Well, I'm not a taxpayer. I don't have a Social Security number. I'm not engaging in anything that would make me. And when I do engage in something that might cause me to owe a tax, like if I walk into a public business, I'm going to pay the sales tax. I'm going to pay the gasoline tax. I'm not going to not render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, right? But I'm not allowed to have income. I don't have a taxpayer ID number. So charity. So how does this work? Well, somebody who knows me. In both of these scenarios, you have to know with whom you deal. Otherwise, you say no because you don't know their name, their character, their nature. You're only conducting business with people you know. You're only providing ministry to those you know. You know their character. And I'm not talking about an acquaintance. I'm talking about somebody you know. Now, do you have to know them? You should know them fairly intimately. I mean, and not in the sense of what most people think intimately, not sexually or anything like that, but you know these people well. And these are people you know because you've grown up with them. You know their character. You know if they're going to stiff you. You know if you need to play tough love with them. You know if you need to be merciful. That's what I'm talking about here. You know how to handle these people as a minister, to give them what they need, not what they cry out for, to strengthen them in the name, character of the Messiah. So that's what I'm talking about. You need to know these people. Over here, who gives a damn? There's all these rules and regulations to protect you from people you don't know, and 99% of the people that walk through your door, you don't know at all. Even people you've seen over and over and over again, you don't know them. Why? Because you don't need to. This is all public business. Who cares? There's all kinds of remedy over here for you to go, in the civil law to make right. Okay, so in private business, what's this other way? Under God's lawful economy, where we render to God that which is God's, you can't affect the public in any way. Nothing public. No commerce. So you don't have a storefront. You don't have any signage. And if you have any signage, like, I used to have a sign that says, not open to the public. Private invitation only. Stay away. I don't publish my phone number. I don't publish an address. I don't publish hours of I have no hours of operation. It's all by invitation only because I know who I'm doing business, private business with. So if you were somebody that I knew that you wanted to do private business for some of my services and goods and things like that, well, then we'd have to get to know each other. And then I have to invite you. And then we're going to have a private contract, a written express private contract that cites Yahuwah's economic private business laws and specifically says this is not a commercial business contract. There is no commerce outside the stream of commerce. This law rules. Yahuwah's economic laws are the laws that dictate this contract. And the reciprocity or consideration will be substance only. None of this commercial funny paper crap. Okay, substance out of the earth, whatever that is. Sometimes people call this barter. And that's kind of true, but not really. Because it's all expressed in the terms and conditions of that private contract. Now, these contracts are really short. It's not like, most of the time, 99% of them are real short. Okay, and you don't, this is pretty quick to write out. Okay, and then once you have a boilerplate, you just print it off and fill in the pertinent parts anyway. So, invitation only, substance only. Everything's private. Okay? And because you're doing substance, how does the government tax, if I wanted, say I traded in this transaction, I traded a bunch of furniture that I made from trees I cut down on my property, and I traded that for cattle under this private contract. Is there any tax owed? No, because that's all substance, that's property. Remember, income is derived from property from the stream of commerce, denominated as corporate profit and gain from the stream of commerce. If this is called this is always a zero-sum transaction. There's no profit. Now, there may be increase, there may be wealth generated, but there's no profit. There's no corporate profit. All I've done is trade something of value, and in return, I've got something different of value that we consider equal value. So this is a zero-sum transaction. But now I've got cattle, from that came to me through my labor and cutting down trees and converting those into some form, like a form of furniture. Okay, this is private business. Remember these rules. So this is hard for me to do. Why? Because 99% of the people I know all around the United States are public persons. They wouldn't have substance if their life depended on it. So there's very few people that I actually can do this with. They're usually people like me. U.S. citizens can't do this. This is kind of why people got in trouble with the raw milk deal years ago. I tried to explain to them, these farmers that were contracting, selling milk to U.S. persons without a private contract and putting it under God's law, because there's nothing that says raw milk in God's law can't be consumed. You can consume it. But who says you can't consume it? Milk sold in the stream of commerce must be pasteurized. It can't be raw. So says the master over here. Well, who the hell were these farmers selling raw milk to? U.S. persons with Social Security numbers and birth certificates. And how are they paying? Bills, notes, checks? What the? Are you that stupid? That's not private business. That's public business. Why are you selling something illegal? See, same thing applies to like marijuana before they started making it illegal. Raw milk, marijuana, things that were illegal. You can't do that over here. And when you're taking these things as payment, you're in commerce. And when you're doing business with U.S. persons, now I can do business with U.S. persons under this, but that's why we have this private contract. And if let's say I were to sell raw milk, I'm going to put a clause in that contract that says something to the effect that you are declaring that you understand that your father, Uncle Sam, has told you not to drink raw milk, and you are violating his law by your free will choice, and you indemnify me of any and all damages. And you've got to sign that, because if somebody finds out, some little Karen finds out, well, Bobby bought raw milk from that guy over there, and that's illegal, and then the FDA comes busting down my door, I got a contract to wave in their face and say, whoa, 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 Junior. That was a private transaction outside of commerce. They gave me substance, and they signed an indemnity waiver within their private contract to do this. That they knew. Go after them. They're the ones that wanted the raw milk. They signed away their right when they signed that indemnity waiver. They declared that they knew they were doing something that their father didn't want them to do. So piss off. And they'll piss off. Okay? So now this is where most of my stuff comes from nowadays, because this is rare anymore. And the further we get closer to the tribulation period, the more and more this is needed. So I do all kinds of stuff to help people. I mean, this whole video series is part of my ministry. What you think I'm doing that? This is for educational purposes to help you out. Few people send me some stuff. Say thank you. Right? Some people just put in the comments, thanks, this is great. Hey, super. My reward is over here in the kingdom. Now, I do all kinds of stuff. I'm like a jack of many trades or many services, but I'm a master of none. I can do automotive work. I can do welding. I can do carpentry. I can do gardening and farming. I can do roofing. I can do all kinds of stuff. So I take those services, all of my abilities, my cognitive abilities, my physical abilities, and I help serve people who have a need. So my first focus is on widow and elderly, the widows and the orphans and the elderly. Because they're on fixed incomes, they may not be able to afford to buy a professionally licensed, professional who's in an occupation, because those services those commercial services in commerce may be incredibly expensive for them, because they've got to cover all these expenses and taxes of doing this kind of business, and that gets very expensive. Over here, it's just me. And somebody will pray, apply, ask, beg, entreat, and say, can you help me with this? And then I have to have it written on my heart to help them. I mean, remember, I got to know these people. I got to know if they're just, really don't need the help, but don't want to pay somebody over here because they're cheap. That's why you got to know these people. Are they sincere in their need? Or are they just trying to steal something so they don't have to do what's over here? And the minute I find out they're really just trying to avoid this rather than having a need, well, then I go, bite me. You are unrighteous. So that's why you need to know all the people with whom you deal. That's a maxim of law. Know with whom you deal. So anybody that's sincere, that needs help, I will render that help to them. Now, it may not always be what they want, but it may be what they need. Now, sometimes, I'll give you an example. I had somebody who was able-bodied. He had a car that broke down, and going over here, that service, and commercially, was dictated a price to him of like $850, and he could not afford that. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. In my ministry, you're capable of turning a wrench and fixing your own car. You just don't know how. So you come over, bring your car to my house. You can use my tools, and I will guide you as a teacher in how to repair this car. And we can order the parts and get the parts, and I'll be there to help you along the way, but you're going to do it. I'm just there to be the teacher. And that strengthened him. That ministry, I'm to strengthen the sheep and make them stronger. So now he's not quite as dependent on this over here. And what did he give? He gave a free will offering because of my time. My time, like everybody, is equal to your life. It's the blood circulating, the life that's circulating in you. So we only have a finite amount of time in these meat sacks before we die. So you give unto the Levite according to his service, but the Levite can't dictate terms. You give a free will offering. I don't tell you what to give me. It's written on your heart as to how valuable my time and service was. Then you give according to that of what you can afford. And what you give, I don't bitch about, because it all works out in the end. If I allow the Spirit of God to work, I've found this out. Some people, for like automotive work, if I did all that work, a mechanic charges $80, $90, $100 an hour. But I might get, $10 from someone for helping them. But that's all they can afford. They're making a huge sacrifice, kind of like the story in the Bible of the old lady who paid all of her bills and stuff, but only had a mite left over, and she gave that all of her savings in case something happened. She gave that over to God. So, but the next time, I had a lady that that I helped out several times. I went over and she wanted me to help her with her garage door. She thought it was busted. It wasn't busted. It took me 10 minutes, and she gave me a $100 bill. And I tried to, at first I was like, oh man, that's a lot of money. But you can't squelch the Spirit. Don't ever do that. If she had it written on her heart to give me $100, because she's paying it forward. That's the other way you can look at it. Because she knew in her heart that I was doing stuff for people that couldn't pay what that time was really worth. See, that's where what comes around goes around spiritually. So in some things, you're going to get way more than what the service you're really providing. But in other times, you're not going to or you're going to have to do it for nothing, because that's all they need it done, but they can't afford it. But it all evens out in the end, because Yahuwah's Spirit will make sure of that, running through all these people who have that written on their heart. That's why you need to know these people that you're dealing with. So you know that they're not trying to cheat you. They're truly in need. And you are helping to strengthen them and serve them. So you have these three ways. Now I can do either one of these, and I can kind of do this over here in a limited way through ministry. But it's really just this. It's just filtered in over here because it's doing it for an artificial entity in commerce. So private business, ministry. So those three ways I can do stuff. But remember, this one is extremely limited for me. I have to be very, very careful not to violate any of these laws and keep all of his laws. See, I got to keep all the laws of all the gods that are around me all the time. Most people say, well, most of that law has been done away with, and I don't even keep, I unrighteously don't even keep all this law that I'm contractually bound to obey because of my oaths of allegiance. Wicked, wicked people. So those are 3 ways. I hope that helps you. Talk to you again soon. Bye.